the power of hope. In 2010, a Chilean mine collapsed. Do you guys remember this? It was a big story. There were 33 men trapped underground, and it was 17 days before the drills pierced through this massive amount of rock that they had to get to the miners. So on day 17, a stream of light pierced through the darkness, and that little bit of light, that little hole that they were able to make on the 17th day, caused this stream of light to shine from the top all the way down into the depths of the earth, piercing that darkness, and a gush of fresh air swept through. The miners, in an article I read, they talked about the stench that was in the mine, and how it smelled putrid, and all of that stuff. Imagine all the stuff, and no air circulating, and I can't even imagine how it smelled. But in that moment, as air came into the mine and as light came into the mine, the miners had hope. Although it would take another 52 days, the men were able to keep it together and enough to stay alive until the rescue was complete. And one of the miners, when he was talking about how he was able to hold on, he said that the sound of the drill was hope. He said because they could hear the drill, they knew somebody was coming for them. They were on the brink of giving up. And just like that, a stream of light brought hope. Hope isn't a passive fantasy-ish wish like, oh, I hope that my favorite team wins. Hope is a sense of confidence that things can turn around. Hope comes from experiences, knowledge, observations, and even stories. The miners knew the process. They knew that as long as the drill was drilling, somebody was coming from them. They had hope. Their story of the miners reminds me of the widow at Zarephath. A drought was in the land, and droughts and famine was not uncommon in the Middle East. And people would have a sense that they were coming. The prophet would often prophesy that a drought was coming, and people prepared. So here we are now when we enter this part of the story, about 3 years into this drought. That's a long time. Now, God had already set Elijah aside, told him to go to the Wadi Cherith, a gorge that had a stream running through it. And God sent ravens with bread and meat to supply Elijah. But now the stream had dried up. And can you imagine that when God has been providing for you all that time just to watch the stream every day get a little bit less, a little bit less, a little bit less, and somehow believe that something was going to happen because God brought Elijah there and had been with Elijah all this time through all this stuff. Could Elijah really have thought that God was just going to let him die next to a dry stream? Elijah had hope. And God spoke to Elijah. God spoke to Elijah in his place, in that space, and he told Elijah to go to Zarephath and that there would be a widow there who would feed him. 3.5 years this drought persisted. Elijah wandered into town just as the widow was gathering sticks. Perfect timing. The story doesn't tell us why the widow didn't return to her father's house or why the menfolk in her husband's family weren't taking care of her as would have been their custom. All we know is that God has sustained Elijah. We know that God has sustained the widow and her son. Here we have 3 people: the prophet, the widow, the child. God was there. Now, Elijah first asked her for a little bit of water. And the story doesn't record that she had anything to say or if she even brought him the water. But while she was going to get the water, he asked her for some bread. And she said, I just have enough for me and my son. I'm about to go home. I'm out here gathering these sticks. I'm about to go home, make a fire, bake us some bread, and then we're going to die because we ain't got nothing left. What compels a person to pursue life in the face of certain death? What compels a person to continue when there doesn't seem to be an end to their suffering? I often wondered this as I sat with unhoused men on this back porch in this alley. They would hang out there and they would actually sleep there and some parts of there outside, and they would be drunk and stinky and all of that. And we would just sit and yuck it up. And I often wondered, we are Rivertown. What kept them from jumping off that bridge? A train came through that town twice a day. What kept them from jumping in front of that train? What made them look for the safest place to sleep at night? What kept them holding on? Hope. There was something on the inside that compelled them to believe that somehow, some way, someday, things would get better. We lost 4 of our friends over the last 3 years, and each death brought with it this renewed determination for our unhoused friends that they were going to live. They wanted to live. There's power in hope. A little video came across my Facebook feed the other day. It was Steve Harvey. He was talking about how he got his start. He lived in his car for a long time. And he said he only had $35 to his name. And this call came and told him he could be on the Apollo and he had to be in New York at such and such day and time. And he did not have the money to get there. Now, the day he got that call, he was ready to call his dad and tell his dad he was giving up. He was ready to come home because this just wasn't working out. After that call, he got another call that said he had a gig and about 3 hours away. He went to that gig. He made $150, stayed another day, made some more money, got his plane ticket, went off to New York, and we know the rest of that story. What drives a person to live in their car to pursue a dream? What drives a person to go against conventional paths to become who they feel they really are inside? Hope. It is the power of hope. The widow had to have had hope, just a sense that somehow, some way, someday things were going to get better. The rain would come. Something was going to break. Now, here she was at the end of her rope, the end of her provisions, with no relief in sight. Now, if she was really okay with dying, she wouldn't have gone out to make that last little morsel of bread. Ain't nobody going to go through all that work, right? They think that that's going to be just the end of it, right? She was at the end of her provisions, but she was trying to prolong her life. Yet the fact that she was prepared to die tells us that her hope was waning. Elijah had hope. He had experienced God's miracles and continued experiencing God's power. Elijah may not have known exactly how God was going to come through, but Elijah knew God. And Elijah's hope was so strong that it compelled him to trust, to believe God for supernatural sustentation, just like he did with the ravens, bringing him bread and meat. Elijah knew that somehow, some way, God was making a way. And Elijah entered the widow's life. When Elijah entered the widow's story, hope entered her story too. There is power in hope. Hope is one of those words that's both a noun and a verb. It's something we can have, it's something we can do, and it's something we can be. Hope is an intangible substance. It's a thing, but we just can't touch it. Jeremiah 29:11 says that, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for good and not harm, to give you a future and what? A hope. That's something in the inside that's tucked inside our heart that while it is based on experiences and knowledge, it isn't based in reason. It's something that overrides our brain. When our brain tells us that there isn't any other way, hope tells us to keep holding on. When our brain tells us we're at the end of our rope, hope tells us, hang on, a little bit more is coming. When hope, that little bit of something, when we feel like we're falling, hope says, that's okay, just release yourself. You're going to fall into God's hands. That's hope. That's hope. That thing that we can't really touch, but it draws us and sustains us. It's a powerful force. It's the opportunity to dream and imagine possibilities, to map out plans. Hope. The miners had hope. Our unsheltered friends had hope. Steve Harvey had hope. The widow had hope. Elijah had hope. There is power in hope. And hope is action. Psalm 119, 114, the psalmist says, you are my hiding place and my shield. I hope in your word. When we're hoping in, that's action. I hope in. I'm thinking about the story of the miners and how easy it would have been for the people on the upside to say, well, it sure is horrible that this has happened, and just declare it done. But somebody knew that there was a way, a possible way, a maybe way, that if we could just get that drill from where it is way away and get it here to this mine, then there's a possibility. Hope is more than a passive wish. Hope compelled the company to call for the drill. Hope compelled the workers to work round the clock to keep drilling. Hope compelled the town to keep on praying. Hope compelled the unsheltered to get up every day. Hope compelled them to find a safe place to sleep at night. Hope is action. Hope compelled Steve Harvey to make a phone call. Hope drove Elijah to go to Zarephath. Hope compelled the widow to gather sticks and bake the bread. Hope is action. Hope is acting on that which we sense might be possible. Hope is doing what we can and trusting God with the rest. Hope is believing that those supernatural signs and wonders that Jesus said would follow those who believe. Hope is believing that when our natural has done all it can do, that God's super comes in and whoosh, like that air through the mind, whooshes through us. And when God's super starts to cover our natural, when the super collides with the natural, the supernatural happens. That's hope. Hope is believing. Hope is doing. There is power in hope. And hope is embodied in the hopeful. 1 Timothy 1:1 says that Jesus is our hope. To embody hope is to be the physical, tangible presence of hope in a space. To embody hope is to be the one who has the audacity to believe that God is. To embody hope is to be the one whose presence gives others an assurance that somehow, some way, everything is going to be all right. It's dismissive to say, well, I'm not Jesus. Jesus is our hope, and I ain't Jesus. But Jesus says, you are the light of the world. You are that light that starts on the outside and pierces the darkness of people's lives and streams through down into the depths where it doesn't seem like light can be. You are the light. We are the embodiment of hope. We are that light streamlining into someone's darkness. We are the voice of reason in the cacophony of misinformation or over information. Our presence can be the reminder, the evidence that God will never leave us, that God will never forsake us. We can be the embodiment, the reminder, the assurance that there is no place we can go from God's Spirit and no place we can flee from His presence. We can be the one who sits with the one who is sitting in their mess and say, yeah, you made a mess of your life, but even right here in this mess, God is with you. Woo. Hope. The power of hope is working through us. It's in us and exuding from us. The power of hope will keep us holding on when we are at the end of our ropes, will compel us to do the little we can, will drive us to become all that we can. I don't know about you, but my hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. On Christ, the solid rock, I stand, and all others is sinking sand. Have hope. Have hope. Hope. You know God has never failed you. Have hope in, hope for, actively pursue, unwaveringly stand. Hope. Embody hope. Your tangible presence is hope. Hope. But what we cannot do is be hope for. We can hope with someone. We can hope in, but we can't hope for. We can't hope for them. That's troubling, because we want to hope for people. One time someone asked me, what's the hardest thing about pastoring? From that day to this, the answer's the same. Wanting more for people than they want for themselves, believing more than people believe in themselves. It's so hard to see all that is embodied, and yet it won't come out. Sometimes we raise our children right. We do all that we can, and they just don't seem to get it. And we want them to get it, and we want them to get it so bad. But we can't hope for them. We can't. We see people, when I would sit with our unhoused friends out there, and I just wanted so much for them to go to rehab. I wanted so much for life to be different, but I couldn't hope for them. But what we can do is hope with them. And sometimes this embodiment of hope, what hope calls us to do, is to be with those ones who just aren't getting it. And not to drive them with force, but to be present. Just present. And to believe, really believe, that the power of God pierces darkness. And all we have to do is be light. All we have to do is be light. Now, often people will ask, like, how can you do that and just let people use you like that because they just want to take from you all the time? Can you imagine if the widow said, I'm not going to let Elijah use me for my bread? Elijah come stay in my home. He don't have no place to stay. And you might say, well, Elijah was the prophet, but the widow didn't know. As a matter of fact, the widow didn't declare the personhood of Elijah until the next section in the chapter, after her son died, and Elijah threw his body on top of him and brought him back to life. Then the woman said, you surely are the voice of God. You really are the man of God. When you're looking at the people around you, you might not really know who they are. They may have came from your womb and you still not be able to see who they are. And hope will challenge us to say, God, I want to see with your eyes. I want to hear with your ears. I want to love with your heart. I want to be where you are. Nobody can use you when you're giving what God has given you to give. Nobody can take what you freely give. That's God's. Hope helps us to sit with folks. Because even if they don't change, I promise you, we change. Hope. Today, where is your hope? Are you maybe like the widow and feel like you're at the end of your rope? Maybe like the miners stuck in a dark cave somewhere, hearing what's happening around you, but not able to get out yet, but holding on. Or you like Elijah, you've been trusting God and trusting God and trusting God and trusting God. You ever wonder if the prophets got tired? I think they did. Because sometimes trusting God is exhausting. Sometimes you just want to know where stuff is coming from. You just want to know what's going on. You know, it's good to believe and trust and have hope, but sometimes you just want some facts. Maybe that's you today. And maybe none of this is you. Except that last part, to embody hope. You see, maybe you are filled with hope. Maybe it's easy for you to trust God. Maybe there's nothing really that's stressing you out right now, and life is good. And that, my friends, that's when you get to take all of that goodness and you get to be the light. You get to be the Elijah in someone's life. You get to be that widow woman, who the widow woman was to Elijah and her son. You get to be that. And not only do you get to be that, God is trusting us to be that. God is trusting us. So this morning, as we meditate as this last song is played, meditate on hope.